dum 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 dum. What up, players? That's right. The big finale to Spookytoberfest is here, and when I say big, holy cow, was this a big model. It's the Hell Pit Abomination for the Skaven army in the Warhammer fantasy battles, and this is my Warboss Taetorial on how I painted mine. And if you are interested in painting yours the same way, how you can achieve the same effect, I want to mention though that when I was filming this, one of the clips, the very first clip, got corrupted and it didn't transfer over when I was rendering and doing all of that. So I'm going to tell you right now what I did for the first clip, and then we're going to jump into the next clip of the video. So what I did first was I spray primered the model in white, because as you can tell, it's a predominantly white model. The color white is predominant on it. It's very striking from across the table. I went for a kind of Pinky and the Brain albino rat kind of look, giant albino rat monster. And then I did enjoy painting up these rat ogre heads, kind of like their Dobermans, with the black on top and the brown on the bottom. I guess, is that Doberman color scheme? Yeah. But so I decided though that I was going to start by spraying the entire model white. And then I decided to paint the flesh areas, the brass, and putting in the wash in the scars. So, take a look at where I did the flesh areas. It was mostly the hands and the legs up to the elbows or the knees, as well as the tail. And then, for the brass, I started by doing the metallic plates at the back and at the front of the model, as well as these warpstone conduits. But then I decided to just do all of the metallics, also with the power drill arm, or this claw arm. Then I decided to just do all of them at the same time, so I did the metallics for the wiring here, and all of this at the back. And then while I was doing that, I did the wood as well. So when we jump to this next clip, you're gonna see that the model has the wash done, the flesh areas done, and the metallics and the wood. You're also going to need to get into the wheel and do both sides of that as well. And I believe I use Calthan Brown for the wood, or no, not Calthan, I'm sorry, Khemri Brown for the wood, Bolt Gun Metal for the silver, and Dwarf Bronze for the brass. And then I washed them with Devlin Mud and Vada Black. And for the skin pieces, Talarn Flesh, I washed those with Ogren Flesh. And once that was done, I went in to get the scars and the stitching, along with the rest of the model, with Baal Red Wash and Leviathan Purple. So, I hope you enjoy the rest of this Warboss tutorial. We're gonna pick it up right where I left off, after those beginning steps, and let me know what you think. Leave me some likes, comments, favorite, and subscribe if you haven't. And I'll see you in the next video. Alright, hey guys, I did do a couple other things since the last part of the clip. After putting on the flesh, I painted all of the skin areas with Ogren Flesh to shade it in, and I also made sure that I had all of the red wash in all of the scars, as well as I noticed some of these pimples he's got all over his body. So scars and pimples, red wash, Ogren Flesh on all of the fleshy bits. Then I did the metals, metallics, and the woods as well. So I know we said brass, Dwarven Bronze to paint this dull brass, and then I just went and did alternating Dwarven Bronze and Bolt Gun Metal for all of the metallics. For the wood, I painted Khemri Brown, and then I washed everything with Badab Black, or I'm going to, like this power claw I just did. but as you can see, it gives a very old and worn look, which is really awesome. We'll highlight that back up in a little bit. But metallics and wood are the next things that I painted, including the metal around this little warpstone thingy. And I'm really liking the claws that I've chosen, that this is just like a monster that Clan Scurvy is using to wreck their boats for salvage, or wreck the boats that they capture for salvage. I think it's really fluffy, and I think it's a really great bit of character to add to the model. And even better that I didn't choose the sensor arm. Yeah, so what else have I done? That's all really, just the metallics and the washes for the metals and the wash for the ogre flesh. What I'm gonna do now is I am going to paint we're gonna continue working with the details before we get to the heads. So we're gonna paint the wires in scab red. Yeah, we're gonna paint the wires in scab red. And these are any of the wires that are leading around the pieces of machinery. So scab red for these wires, and we're going to be painting all the warpstone in snot green. So there are little warpstone bits here in our little conductors, and the wires we're going to paint scab red. And of course this giant honking piece of warpstone here at the front of the mouth. So red and green. We're also going to be focusing on the warpstone sticking out of the creature's arms. There are bits of warpstone here, as well as here, and those we're going to be painting green, snot green as well. You might have noticed that I've also started to highlight up the skin of the body and add in shading, and I suggest that you do that anytime. It doesn't have to be now, but when you can, just go into the folds of the skin with some thinned down Bad Black, and then highlight up the upper parts of the skin with some thinned down Skull White. And that way you'll get some nice shading in there that can be drying while you're doing your bits and details. Okay, so again, that's woods and metallics for this step, and then dulling it down with Bad Black. And then doing the wires and the warpstone with scab red and snot green. If you don't have scab red, you could also go with red gore or dark flesh. Those are all dark red colors. You don't want to go with the bright blood red because it's going to take away from the bright white and the red pinkish bruised skin. And since there's so much of that, you want it to just kind of melt into the background along with all this machinery that your viewers will only notice when they really look up close at what you've got going on in the model. Okay, so that's wires, metallics, and warpstone. And when we come back, we're also going to start talking about getting into the claws and the bone areas, like these bony protrusions sticking out of the shoulder, as well as the nails, teeth in the rat heads, and all that stuff. Okay, so we'll see you in a little bit. Alright, so the first thing you might notice is that I added purple to all of the scars and the scabs, as well as just the shadows of the hands and the legs, because this will give you a very good bruised effect. So into the shadowy recesses of between the toes, as well as the scabs up here and the pimples and the warts, you want to add the Leviathan purple wash, which should flow very nicely into all of the gaps. Also, I've started painting the spines, the talons, the nails, the claws, all of the bone areas with Khemri Brown. And we are going to build up with this in just a little while, but you want to base coat all of these little spikes with Khemri Brown. And the biggest thing you're going to notice is that I added the stripe down along the back in Chaos Black. And it starts off really slow, and then it gets bigger and wider at the top, and you want to cover all of the heads. So this is the bone plate for the helmet, so I just colored that Khemri Brown, like I said, like on my bone. And then I covered all of these guys in Chaos Black, and that's because we're going to paint them up kind of like a Doberman, where the The top part of their heads are black, but then we're going to be painting Calthan brown on the undersides in just a little bit. So I'm going to do that and show you what that looks like. And I didn't paint the teeth brown yet, but that's because I wanted to wait. So Calthan brown for the next part, the pattern. And once you cover up this scar with Chaos Black, you're going to notice that it's really, really dark. So what I did is I painted red gore into the scar, and in a minute I'm going to highlight up the sides of each of the scarring, each of the lines in the scarring, and then that will bring up the scar even more and make it nice and bright. If you, it's a trick I learned, that you highlight up the sides of the lines of anything you're doing, and then it'll look a lot cleaner and a lot brighter. Some of you out there might already know that, you veteran painters. So, awesome, right on. Is there anything else I did? No, I think that was it. Just added purple wash, started painting the bone, and then added the sea monster stripe to the guy's back. So, I will see you as soon as I am done painting the brown Doberman pattern on these rats, and then we will continue with the next upcoming details. So here's my Doberman pattern heads and my highlighted scarring on the back. I'm gonna wash this down a little bit with Bad Black so it's not as much of a contrast, but I just wanted to show this to you before I did that. So what I did, as you can see, is that if I can, where's my paintbrush? Here's one I can use. Oh, I got some brown paint on his head, I gotta clean that up. Let's go from another side. I took some Calthan brown paint and I painted the cheek, or the side of the head, and the underside, as well as the bottom half of the snout up here and his jaw in Calthan brown. Carried that all the way over underneath to the other side. The good thing with using Calthan brown is that it's a good base for the teeth, for the deneb stone, because we're continuing to highlight the bone up. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight up the black with some Codex Gray and maybe some Fortress Gray on any areas where the light is naturally hitting, like the noses, the folds of skin where the black is most prominent and you see the most shine. And then I'm going to wash that down with Bad Black. I'm going to wash down the brown areas with Devlin Mud. And once that's done, I'm going to highlight up the teeth and all the bone, including the spikes on the back, on the tail, and the talons on the feet, which should all be Khemri brown. Talons, bone protrusions, the bone plate for the head, and the teeth for the rats. I'm going to highlight that up with deneb stone, and then I am going to add in the modeled pattern to the scales, or to the black pattern, the black and white. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take some skull white paint, some thinned down skull white paint, and make some jagged lines, and just make a random patternization to look like the black solid black is splitting off into smaller little areas, and we'll see how that goes. Okay, so I'm gonna do that, and I'll show you what my finished result looks like in just a second. Alright, as you can see, I added verdigris to the bronze and the silver. I painted the rats, and let's take a look at the modeled pattern. I think it was okay. One thing that I did was I tried going with just using the white, but it just got too hard, so I just took some black paint, I thinned it down, and then I splotched it in a pattern that kind of is random, and I think it works a lot better. So yeah, instead of using skull white to trace a line through the black that's already there, yeah, it's a lot easier to just take some Chaos Black paint and model yourself. I added some blood red into the scar to make it pop a little bit more. For the rats, I painted the tails Talarn flesh for all of them, and Khemri brown for these three on the bottom, and then for this gray one, I used Fortress Gray, and then I just washed all of them with Bad Black. The verdigris for the metal is just simple Hawk Turquoise watered down a lot, and then just thinly traced carefully traced, into all the cracks and crevices. I think it turned out really well. Let's take a look at the chest plate. Yeah, it came out really well there, and it came out really well on the claw arm as well. Yeah, so anywhere where there are joints and stuff, and it adds just a little bit of a kick of color to the rest of the model. Oh, Hell Pit Abomination almost fell down. That would have been terrible. I also painted the rat's eyes up here. I painted them first with red gore, and then blood red, and then blazing orange, and then I tipped each light to give it a spooky, otherworldly glow. I gave each a little dot of elf flesh at the front. Kind of make them all look like they're looking forward. Okay, so now the final details. We're getting into the home stretch, and we're gonna do the warp stone. The last thing we did was just painted snot green, so now we're going to highlight with scorpion green, and then we're going to wash with Thraka green wash. And yeah, I think I think the warp stone was the last thing I had to do. So I'm gonna paint the rim of the base, do the warp stone, and we will wrap up this Warboss Taetorial. Woo! Alright, and here is our finished model. Here's our Hell Pit Abomination in all of its glory. I painted the rim Khemri brown, and you might notice that earlier in the video, one of the first steps I did was paint the base, and that's just because I glued the model to the base when I was constructing it, and if I had to do this again, I probably would not glue the model to the base and do them separately. But having it on the base was a lot easier. I got to put it on this little painting piece of cork, and because the base is square, it just kind of fit like this, whereas if I had to just paint the model all by itself, I'm not sure what I would have done for that. But I really enjoyed this model. It was a huge undertaking. It took me a long time, and I lost the intro to the video, which I'm sure you already know by now. But the finished model, I think, is worth it, and I think this is a great way to close Spookytoberfest. I want to thank all of my subscribers, old and new, for all of your support, all of your suggestions, and all of your feedback throughout Spookytoberfest. And yeah, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.